In the winter of 1937, the Thompsons would realize just how dangerous living in Cactus Range could be.
We went out to my father's mine for Christmas vacation, and Christmas Eve it started to snow. And we thought, isn't that wonderful? We're going to have snow for Christmas. Well, it kept snowing and snowing and snowing and blowing, and pretty soon the snow was practically even with the roof of our home. We were snowed in until February 14th. We had no radio, and we had no contact with the outside world. We didn't know what was going on elsewhere. This was just us. We ran out of fuel for the lamps, and so we went to bed at sundown because you couldn't see anything in the cabin. And then we'd get up at sunup, and there were great big bunk beds built in the back of the cabin. And Joy and I usually occupied the top bunk and my mother and father the bottom one. But during this extreme cold, all four of us, with all our clothes and blankets we had, would be in one bed because we had to keep warm. We kept thinking that every day somebody was going to come and help us out. My father did want to walk out, and my mother and I, told him not to, because I can remember when he'd go out to look for rabbits, the crust of the snow would break and he'd be way up to his chest in snow. And so we knew that if he were to try to walk out, that he wouldn't make it. So he stayed because we actually forced him to stay. One reason that we hung in the way we did too, my parents were both very full of faith. They believed that we were getting out, we'd be okay. They were very positive people. And I think when you have positive parents, it rubs off on you.
Despite these adversities, Thompson continued to pursue his goal to strike it rich.
This silicified material is what you find underground. You can hear the silicification is the way that sounds. And it's got a lot of iron pyrite in it, which is, when it oxidizes, makes that rusty outcrop. And this is what contains the gold and silver. So if he found a big enough pot of this, he would have been excited.
I think what kept him going was he was so certain that the deposit was there and that he was on the track of it and that things were going to be entirely different. And I think that was his main motivation.
A prospector always has the thing that his next round is going to find the mother lode of the bonanza. And there was enough mineral in this thing that they did find enough to keep them interested.
One man who became interested was an entrepreneur by the name of Carl Fuchs, some 30 years earlier during the boom days of Goldfield.
Thinking of my father, I think that it was gold fever that brought him to the area. He would hear all the rumors. I mean, the men would come in and talk about where they had found a new claim.
Marguerite Fuchs Purcell, born in 1917, is the daughter of Carl Fuchs, a restaurateur who had come to Goldfield from San Francisco in 1906, just days after the April 18th earthquake. Carl sought opportunity in Goldfield, where the culture promised hope for those who desired a new start.
There's something about a mining town that is so different than other, farming communities or anything like that, because there were so many black sheep who made good.
Shortly after moving to Goldfield, Carl bought property and built the California Beer Hall. His brother Joe worked alongside him until he assumed ownership of the Santa Fe Saloon. Both were likely spots where the Fuchs brothers would hear tall tales from prospectors.
They would come from all over, and really not know what the desert was like. Being a bar, I think people would come to town and just maybe come in to get a drink. Well, they were looking so often for somebody to stake them, what they called staking them, because they would come with jewelry, they would come with other things, but they would want to turn that in and get money for that, because they had to buy a donkey, or buy shovels and the food to go out. From the way he talked, it was sort of like a pawn shop, but it was foolish. They just didn't comprehend what it meant to be prospecting. But then you thought of Jim Butler, who founded Tonopah. He did it that way.
Life in these boom towns wasn't always easy. Some men let greed and desperation get the better of them. In many cases, they began to steal from the mines where they worked. The theft of raw ore, also known as high grading, had become a crime punishable by death.
One time, this miner came in, and he had worked in the mines for some time, and my father always felt he was really very honest, but maybe just this one time picked up this piece of ore and knew he should get rid of it, so he asked my dad to just keep it for him and he would pick it up later. But then there was rumors going around that the owners were suspecting that there was a lot of high grading. So it became so bad that the owners sent inspectors in who looked like they were miners, but they were instructed that if they ever saw anybody high grading, that they should shoot him. So my father later found that the man who brought this into him was shot in the mine.
In 1908, Marguerite's father decided to invest in a mine nearly 30 miles east of Goldfield called the Golden Chariot.
Of all the areas in the Cactus Range, this one has the most potential to develop into a gold mine if one had the money to look for it.
Up and running by the end of 1908, the Golden Chariot and surrounding mines, the Mohawk Daisy and Last Chance, became part of what's known as the Jamestown District. Jamestown had a post office and its own newspaper. Prosperity seemed to define all of Carl's business ventures. But 12 years later, a national event would change his life forever.
When Prohibition was started, it just changed our life. I mean, it really did. And he was very proud of the fact that he wouldn't bootleg. He did try to make it for a while, just serving near beer, which they were allowed to make, and then of course sarsaparilla and a few other things, but it just wasn't going. Dad had been his own boss all those years, and it was a matter of his having to find work. I mean, who would hire him? His spirit was sort of crushed. It really was by that time.
Carl's belief that the mine would pay off carried him through this dark period. The mine was a vehicle in which he could salvage his spirit and provide for his family. But Carl would need to entice investors to further develop his mine.
He had taken men out there, and I think he was trying to interest them, you see, in maybe investing further in it.
What was going to cost you the money is going to be boring the hole. In other words, digging the shaft and proving the site. In other words, going down and following the mineralization to find out if there was a good strike.
Neighboring operations in Cactus included holdings by the Bailey family and Adolph Nair, who lived and mined within 2 miles of James Thompson. Merritt Bailey moved his wife and 2 daughters from Los Angeles to Cactus Range in 1928. He built his own home, the only one on the range with electricity, and 2 other buildings presumably used as boarding houses. Mr. Nair lived in a cove of 7 buildings, including his house, possibly all built by him. Records indicate he mined for 30 years, earning no money from his labor. Instead, he, like Bailey, unsuccessfully attempted to sell claims or holdings to investors. Nair hoped to sell his property to the Mining, Refining, and Smelting Company for $100,000.
They called him the specimen bug in one of the letters, which I thought was kind of interesting, which means he's the kind of guy that instead of giving them a sample with an average grade of his face, why he would go pick out the good stuff and have that assayed and give that to them so it looked good. So in a way, he was trying to perhaps overemphasize his property.